Okay, everybody, thank you for joining us. And if you're rewatching this live, thank you for watching. I am here with retired Lieutenant Colonel Kostis Dupoinis. And today we're going to be doing something a little bit different, a little bit off the cuff. And we will be watching together the Helsinki Commission on Russia's shadow war on NATO. And this should be very, very interesting to see the three different the witnesses that they have from the panel. Let me just take a look at who the witnesses are going to be. So the three witnesses are Mr. Erkki Tori, National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister of Estonia, Dr. Benjamin L. Schmitt, Senior Fellow, Department of Physics and Astronomy and Kleiman Center for Energy Policy at University of Pennsylvania, Mr. Michael Weiss, investigative journalist and author. So we'll have these three panelists at the Helsinki Commission, which is a subsect in Congress. So it's a bipartisan commission made up of congressmen and senators that study foreign policy issues that are very important to us. So, Colonel, the topic is in this hearing is called Russia's Shadow War on NATO. What do you think the conversation is going to be like in this hearing that's going to take place?
Okay, I'm not sure exactly what's going to take place in the hearing, but there is a shadow war going on NATO. They're really, the Russian propaganda media is really going all out. I'm not sure how much it affects Latvia and Estonia, but I'm familiar with what's going on in Lithuania. Mm-hmm. Lithuania, they're trying to split up the country, turn people against each other. You got parties that are running that are, for getting Lithuania out of NATO and getting Lithuania even out of the EU. Mm-hmm. They're kind of masking themselves behind family values and traditional values and all that other stuff. But basically, some of these parties, I think, have been infiltrated by Russian disinformation agents, and they're doing the job. They're being very effective in dividing the country. So last night, I participated in a meeting on in case of war, mobilization and evacuation of the country, and again, they've got their hands full on what's going to happen in case Lithuania ends up going to war. So it's a tight thing, and I know they're spreading disinformation here, and it's very serious because the Ukrainians are fighting with one hand tied behind their back, and we're allowing the Russians basically to lay down these self-imposed, we self-impose them on ourselves, red right. lines, and it's prolonging the war and costing Ukrainian lives.
Yeah, and it seems that this hybrid type of warfare that they're probably discussing is the tactics that kind of led to the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. It was just finding where the weak spots are, whether it's in the social dynamics of the country or economics or political, and just kind of set a divide into the country that they're going to invade. And then they find the military aspect of where the points of weaknesses are. And you and I both touched up on it a couple times with the Suwalki Gap. And I think it's, kind of have to prepare for that. And I think you mentioned about this mobilization plan that's being drawn up by the Lithuanian government. I think it's important for them working on this in the early stages, right?
Yeah, it's a good thing that they're working on it because, any plan that you put into effect, first of all, the enemy has a veto power over it. Second of all, you need to rehearse these plans, and Lithuania plans to do that, which is really a good sign because during the rehearsals is when a lot of the problems that you would run into come up because, you think you have this plan, you know how many buses you need to evacuate people and all that stuff. And Then did you count on the reinforcement troops coming through the Suwalki Gap from Germany and from Poland? So what do you do with the roads? Does it turn into a huge parking lot like Beirut is right now? If anybody's following the news, the Israelis told the people of Beirut to evacuate.
Mm-hmm.
The highways are just clogged with cars and vehicles right now, and nobody's moving anywhere. So that's a thing too, because the evacuation that would have to take place in Lithuania in case of a war is pretty huge. I don't know if I'm at liberty to discuss the numbers, but they're not.
Yeah, that's fine.
They're not small. Yeah.
We'll just keep it at a high level.
Yeah.
Case. So, but I think it's important to have that discussion, and you and I talked about, having a civilian way for them to defend themselves and a force to kind of protect themselves, just like in the good old days of the Lithuanian Soviet anti-resistance war in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah, the question is, how much of the population will want to stay and fight and be dedicated, because, women and children is always the first call, but yeah, you have to evacuate the children, definitely. You have to evacuate the hospitals of people that are sick, so you free up the hospitals for the wounded and so on and so on. But then, women, women can fight too. Women can fly drones. Women can make, camouflage netting. Women can make Molotov cocktails. So the question is the country willing to do that? And that's the key, the motivation to fight and defend your country. The Ukrainians have it in spades now. Even though they have it in spades, they still, I think, 20% of the Ukrainian population evacuated. So right. I think the figures might be very similar for Lithuania. Some of them self-evacuated in the Ukrainian case, but in the Lithuanian case, they're having a planned evacuation. Plus, I guess whoever wants to leave is going to leave. You can't stop people from leaving. I don't think you can, but that's stuff that they have to consider. Right.
Absolutely. So people that are watching right now, thank you for watching. And if you have any questions, type it in right now. We'll try to get to the questions while the hearing's happening, but we still have 2 or 3 minutes right now to kind of discuss it. Let me take a look and see the video inside room 210 in the house, I believe. Or is it the Cannon building? Okay, it looks like there's still waiting 2 more minutes on there, and this is just a unique position, and because we might have other people join us. We might have somebody that might be inside the room and maybe pull aside a witness or a congressman to discuss. That would be wonderful. We'll see. You have to stay tuned out there and see with how this is going to conduct as well. So I guess yesterday in the news, we also had an incident where Russians flew over Alaskan airspace.
They do that quite often. They test our defenses. They're testing European defenses too. They're flying, drones over Romania. They're flying drones in, I think, even into Latvia. So, and they're going to see what our reaction is.
Right.
And how good are we at picking them up? That's the other thing. Can they sneak in? How long does it take for us to react?
How long does it take to react, and what are we going to do to move forward? Okay, it looks like they're still getting people into the room right now. Watching from Vilnius, thank you for watching. Okay, question on here. Rand previously outlined a scenario where Russian troops would cross the border and entered Narva, about 87% ethnic Russian due to Soviet ethnic cleansing. How does NATO avoid a why die for Danzig type of scenario?
Yeah, that is a very good question, because when planning for this mobilization of the Baltics, we talk about the Baltics as one unit sometimes. The question is, will the Russians actually attack only one country or all three countries at the same time? There's one scenario where they only attack Estonia because of the number of ethnic Russians. I don't think 87%, well, Narva, yeah, is 87%, but Estonia itself is not all Russian. I think it's something like in the 30% percent range where they have that problem. A lot of these people are loyal Estonians. We have some of those people also in Lithuania who are of Russian descent, but they consider themselves Lithuanians.
Right.
There are people in Ukraine who are, Sersky was born in Russia,
Mm-hmm.
the commanding general of the Ukrainian armed forces. He grew up in Russia. But there are a lot of people now in Ukraine, especially that they might be of Russian background, but they consider themselves Ukrainians. So we shouldn't automatically discount people who are Russian. A lot of Russians that have left Russia are anti-war. Not all of them, but a lot of them. So
Absolutely.
I know I'm going to get criticized for saying that, but there are some people that say all Russians are bad. I don't agree with that.
Yeah. I don't either. There are some that are helping us defend against the imperialism. So, okay. And before the hearing starts shortly, if you could, everybody, ladies and gentlemen that are watching, you can go to our website, www.baffle.com, and then just look for the call to action button. And maybe I'll leave the link in the comments, the live comments right now. But you can send a message to your congressman and your senator, and you can ask them to support the Baltic Security Initiative. And it's about a $230 million to upgrade Baltic defenses. So we really need that to defend the Baltics, shore up, security in the region, and prevent any possible war or full-scale invasion.
Yeah, this is a very important thing because Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, they're small countries, basically the size of a good size American city, and they have to maintain the roads, they have to maintain everything in the country, plus maintain the military. And that's a very expensive thing. Military hardware is not cheap. Tanks are not cheap. Armored personnel carriers are not cheap. Helicopters are not cheap. So, when you're asking a small city to basically pay for all this, it's very hard. So the American help would be very handy. And there's a lot of unused equipment that the United States has and that it'll never use, that they can send over there and help, and it would be put to good use. And I know these countries have given away a lot of what they already have to Ukraine because, the thinking, I think, is correct that they would rather the Ukrainians use it and maybe win this war instead of them having to use it themselves.
That's right. We have about 3,000 M1 Abrams tanks in Northern California that are just sitting in the desert, just sitting in there, just rusting right now. And it actually costs the U.S. taxpayer to just monitor it, make sure that there's no security breach, that there's no environmental harm. It's very costly for it just to sit there, and might as well just send it over to Ukraine.
I'm in Tucson, Arizona. We got 4,000 airplanes. We got the biggest military aircraft boneyard in the world, and a lot of those planes are still usable. They're supposedly for an all-out war that lasts for a while, but we can turn this over to Ukrainians and Lithuanians and Poles also.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, to the people that are just watching right now, it looks like they're getting people in. So you'll hear the audio turn on and off because they turn on their microphones on and off because if they have a secret conversation between their staff members and the congressmen or senators in the commission, obviously they want to keep that there. Let me see. Yeah, it still looks like it's being live. So,
I think we had another question and it disappeared. I don't know.
oh, let me see. Hold on, I'm getting a phone call. Give me 1 second. Okay. Okay. On the screen, less a question, more a comment. I don't know how much poking and prodding Russia and China is doing to disincentivize enlistment in the U.S. military.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that. You know, the military is a calling. It's a profession. It's not, people don't join the military for the money, although the money is much better than when I went in. I went in as second lieutenant with $289 a month. And out of that, I had to buy my own food and buy my own uniforms. But yeah, the dedication that you have to have, because you're going to be separated from your family. You're going to be sent into zones where you're in danger. It puts a strain on your family life and everything else. So you really have to be dedicated to join the military. You really have to want it. Now, the question is, there's a lot of stuff going on in our society that basically, I call it being anti-patriotic, actually. You know, that the United States is not perfect. Yeah, we all know the United States is not perfect, but we go back to history and dig up all the imperfections, and basically that discourages people from wanting to follow this wonderful profession that protects this country and gives you also a leg up. I think the education you get in the military, you can't top that. I went through it, and I understand that, you know, you get thrown into situations where you have to learn how to act and react and be a leader and all that other good stuff. So that's it's a good profession for those that want to join it. But yeah, there's stuff going on in the internet that says, you know, yeah, you don't want to do that.
Right.
It's too tough.
Let me see what's going on here with the. Just checking on. Yeah, it looks like they're going to start in a couple minutes. Yeah, I think we're just waiting for them to start. So if anybody has any questions, before the hearing begins, feel free to make a comment below. So they had a great hearing last week with Dr. Timothy Snyder, and very important.
That's my phone. Sorry.
Oh, okay. So while we're still waiting as well, this week is the Ukraine Action Summit.
Correct.
And do you have any idea what they're kind of pushing for this week?
Yeah, they have about 600 people there, and basically a new aid package, and also the biggest thing they're pushing for is for Congress to put pressure on the White House to let Ukraine defend itself by knocking out those bases from which they get rocketed. Now, Storm Shadows and that the British make are made with some American components. So basically, the U.S. president, has vetoed power over using those weapons. It's kind of funny. The Swiss were providing the Germans with ammunition for a while. The Germans were giving it to Ukraine, but the Swiss wouldn't let the Ukrainians use the ammunition. Those kind of things go on, and they're stupid, but they do go on. So yeah, it's a question of now being able to shoot the archer before he lets loose all those arrows at you. Ukraine's getting hit with a tremendous amount of drones and missiles every day, and they're targeting civilians. It's not that they're going after military. Yeah, they might be going after some military, but they mostly hit civilian targets and civilian casualties, and these are basically war crimes. But we won't stop it. So yeah, this is a bad thing. Timothy Snyder, in the Helsinki Commission hearings earlier, put it quite succinctly. We're drawing these red lines for ourselves, which are unheard of. The enemy can attack your country, but you can't strike back at his country. All the battle, all the war, all the action has to take place on your territory, but not on his territory. Who fights like that? Who thinks like that?
Well, I got a clip. Let me just share that before real quickly. So,
yeah.
And to a large degree, the Russians have been able to control the strategic discourse, setting up for us new rules in war, which have never existed before. Like, for example, that when you invade another country, the entire war should take place on the territory of the country you've invaded. No one has ever said that before because it's completely absurd. And yet somehow it's been accepted in the United States as normal that this war should be fought on Ukrainian territory. There is no precedence for that kind of idea. Another idea that the Russians have that we've accepted is that it's normal, for example, when you and I were in Kiev, for ballistic missiles to rain down on the city where we were trying to do normal business, but it's somehow not normal for ballistic missiles from Ukraine to go into Russia. Why is that? Why is it normal for one country and not for another? It has a great deal to do with imperial thinking, which we have accepted. There's something precious, special, etc. about Russia, and somehow it's okay for Ukrainians to be victims because they always have been victims. We need to investigate, I think, that understructure of thinking, which I believe has guided our policy in the wrong way. So as far as empires are concerned, I'll return to what I said at the end, trying to respond now to your question about a victory plan. I believe the Ukrainians are right about something that they're hard pressed to convince us of. And I think what I'm saying now is consistent with the history of empire. The Russians are going to negotiate peace when they believe they are losing. And so if anyone is serious about negotiation, that person should be trying to get the Russians into a position where they think they might be losing. The Ukrainians get that, but they're having a really hard time making us understand that pairing. So when they talk about a victory plan or a peace plan, what they mean is together the West and Ukraine do enough to get Russia to a point where it might negotiate sincerely. They're not there now.
Brilliantly said. Brilliantly said. Yeah, that was what I was referring to, and that's so true. You go to war, and we've learned this. If you're not willing to go all out to win, pull all the stops out, like we did in the invasion of Iraq or Panama, or you're going to have needless casualties. You're going to prolong that war. You're going to make it very expensive, and so on and so on. So give the Ukrainians the permission to use these things. Give it to them. Give them the weapons that they need to win. And this war will be over, because there's only so much that the Russian people, the oligarchs and the Soloviki in Russia are going to put up with from Putin. I think Putin is on his way out, but the question is he needs a little push.
Absolutely. Let me play one more from. Looks like they're still waiting on the hearing, but let me. This is Denmark's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen, and let me just get it a play right now.
Is let us end the discussion about red lines.
Okay.
And let us not delay what the Ukrainian needs, not only to protect themselves, but also to push Russia back.
So on the question of whether or not Ukraine should be allowed without restriction to strike within Russia with donated gear, where do you stand?
It has, of course, to be according to international law, but from a Danish perspective, we are not working with restrictions. And I think it has been a mistake during this war to have a public discussion about red lines. Mm-hmm. For me, it is, the meaning of this public discussion about red lines and restrictions are simply giving the Russians too good card on their hands. Yeah. So, of course, Ukraine needs to work according to international law, but as long as they do that, there are no restrictions from a Danish perspective. I will not accept that Putin decides what the rest of the world should do. He is the only one responsible for a war going on in Europe. He could end this war right now. My suggestion.
Perfectly said. Perfectly said. And that's a problem. You got people, for whatever reason, politicians in Washington, D.C., some politicians in Washington, D.C. do not want Russia to lose. Yeah, they would like to have a peace, but they don't want Russia to lose. And the only way the Russians are going to give up on this, they don't think like we do. They're in there. Putin is in there because if he gets off this tiger, he's dead. So he's got to keep this going as long as he can to stay in power. And it's a question of will somebody in Russia decide to get rid of him because it's getting too expensive for Russia and for them personally. There's no doubt about it. We're asking the Ukrainians to go in and kick ass, but then we're tying one leg behind their back, and that's not a good thing if anybody's ever got into one of those contests. So right. It's not there, and I don't know why. I don't understand why. I think I know, but it's a question of they don't want the Ukraine to lose, but they don't want the Russians to lose either. So they want to keep Putin in power or whatever because they think maybe it's over the atomic weapons that are stationed all over Russia, and who's going to control them if the Russian Federation falls apart. But, Soviet Union fell apart and nothing happened to those weapons anyway. And as a matter of fact, Ukraine had the largest amount of them. And I think about a third of the weapons were in Ukraine, and the Ukrainians gave those up.
And all the scientists and all the good people that are good in tech are from Ukraine under Soviet occupation.
Yeah.
I think it's important to note that all the good people are from there. And
yeah, the Ukrainians do have a good background. They used to make all the tanks for the Russians. They used to make the Antonov planes. They used to make the ships in their shipyards. So it was an arms industry in Ukraine, and they're going for it right now too. So.
Still waiting.
Wow.
It's
leave it to Washington, D.C., right?
yeah, we're on D.C. time, so
yeah.
Let me just refresh it just in case. Still nothing going on right now. Thank you, everybody, for being patient. And watching us have a conversation.
Yeah, just a side note here. Norman Grumman is going to be building an ammunition plant in Lithuania. They're going to manufacture 30-millimeter shells there. So it's a good sign that the Baltics are revving up for it. 30 millimeter, the 30 mic is the stuff the Bradley uses very effectively. If you've seen the Bradley in action a couple of times on videos, that's the ammo that they use. It really keeps people's heads down.
What do you like about the Bradley?
It's survivable for the crew. It's fast. It's maneuverable, and it comes armed with just about anything you need. You have tow missiles on some of them. You have the 30 mic. You have 50 cals. You have all kinds of possibilities. It's a real good fighting vehicle, and the main thing though is that it's survivable. I'm not fond of the M113 because that's got issues. Yeah, you use it because you have nothing better, but the Bradley is definitely the vehicle to go to for Russian vehicles. When Russian infantry fighting vehicles, they get hit, it's over for the crew.
Yeah.
The Bradleys, most of the time, the crews will come out of it alive, even if it's totally disabled and wrecked.
Right. Okay. Still waiting. So, I mean, I think they're just busy with all these Ukraine Action Summit meetings. So I think
could be. Yeah, they got 600 people visiting. When I was part of that deal, we visited all the congressmen and senators from Arizona. Some were on board for aid to Ukraine, some were not. But we visited even those that were not on board and not favored. I don't know where they're getting their information from, but a lot of it is basically Russian talking points that they come up with as an argument against providing aid. Ukraine was corrupt. Well, how do we know Ukraine's corrupt? Because they brought up all these cases. Well, they're bringing the cases up because they're actually prosecuting people.
Right.
That's why you hear about them. I mean, if you didn't hear about them, then I'd be worried about it. But when they publicize in their newspapers and their press that they're relieving this guy or moving this guy out, then it's they're fighting it.
That's how I always respond to the corruption conversation. Is that they're being arrested and prosecuted. So what are you saying, that people with power aren't gonna mess around sometimes?
Yeah, we have the same problem in our own society, and the United States and Lithuania. The Lithuanian military have the issue, what they call the silver spoons, where they bought eating utensils, and they cost a fortune for the military.
All right. While we're waiting, I'm gonna pull up your organization, Blue Yellow for Ukraine, just on.
Thank you.
Screen, and you can just briefly talk about it while we're waiting for the hearing to begin. So I have it right on the screen.
Yeah, Blue Yellow Lithuania was originally started in 2014 by Jonas Omanas, a Swedish citizen who became a Lithuanian citizen, speaks perfect Lithuanian, because he saw what happened in Maidan and what was going on, and was kind of ticked off about the fact that the Ukrainians were not ready and militarily and everything else. We joined the organization a couple of years ago because when the Russians invaded Ukraine, we needed an outlet in the United States. The United States, we work together with Blue Yellow LT. We provide aid, they fill in for us, we fill in for them. But the big thing is, if you're in the United States and you donate, you don't want to donate to Blue Yellow LT because there's no tax write-off. Donating to us, we're a 501c3, and we basically are tax exempt. So any donation you give to us is deductible from your income taxes. And not only that, we don't pay sales tax when we buy stuff for Ukraine. So your dollar goes a longer way with us than going that way. Naturally, we work together, and we're getting donations in kind and everything else. I think between us and Lithuania so far, we're somewhere over $90 million worth of aid to Ukraine. And these are everything from drones to anything else. We've got Blue Yellow USA. We've got crews over there that a couple of Americans who basically are volunteers there, and they're driving ambulances and providing EMT training to Ukrainians and helping people evacuate and so on. So we got people over there that we need to provide with gas and everything else. So your donations for Ukraine, if you go through Blue Yellow USA, will go a long way. So we'd appreciate every penny we get from our viewers.
Thank you.
If you go on our website, you can see all the things we've done and all the aid we've provided over the years. So medical program and everything from drones to first aid kits.
All right. I'm starting to hear noise from the hearing. Just see.
Yeah, Jonas, by the way, a couple of years ago or a year ago, did appear before the Helsinki Commission, along with Rima, our former director, who's now in Ukraine working there. So we're pretty dedicated to the cause of Ukraine. I have, none of our board members gets a salary of any sort. So we're all doing this pretty much pro bono for that. But we do support our people in Ukraine, with gas money and money to live and so on. So
Absolutely.
yeah, one of the kids I know that's driving the ambulance, he sold his house and his car in North Carolina and just packed up and went there to help out. And
Yeah, I'm starting to hear noise. And if you're just joining us, we're live streaming the hearing Russia's shadow war on NATO by the Helsinki Commission. So there's 3 witnesses testifying: Mr. Erkki Tori, the National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister of Estonia; Dr. Benjamin L. Schmitt, Senior Fellow, Department of Physics and Astronomy, and Kleiman Center for Energy Policy, University of Pennsylvania; Mr. Michael Weiss, an investigative journalist and author. And since the outset of Russia's genocidal invasion of Ukraine, the United States and NATO have sought to avoid direct confrontation with Russia by conditioning Ukraine's use of military aid, including several restricting their use of long-range weapons inside of Russia. However, Russia is already engaged in a shadow war against the democratic world, using assassinations, election interference, and sabotage to destabilize NATO and undermine the security and values of the transatlantic alliance. The escalation of these actions is particularly alarming, with directed operations targeting critical energy infrastructure and defense industries across NATO countries. In addition, Russia has shown a growing willingness to engage in military provocations within NATO borders, including violations of airspace and aggressive exercises near Estonia. The Russian government is operating on a war footing and is not structured for good faith deployment engagement.
yeah,
So
they're also interfering with the GPS signals coming from satellites and causing all kinds of havoc with commercial flights over the Baltics and other areas. So this is playing with people's lives. They have no compunction. They shot down the airliner during the earlier in 2014 when they were having things, and one of their guys was sentenced by the International Criminal Court, but then Putin arrested him too because Strelkov or Gherkin. They're definitely playing around with that, and that's kind of a dangerous thing. And I'm surprised we don't hear too much more about it in the press or the media. You don't
Yeah.
do that with airliners and cause problems because you can cause a huge accident.
Well, yeah, but Russia has had a history of messing around with passenger planes in the past with
Yep.
AFL in 1983, and then you had the Malaysian airline from Amsterdam to Malaysia. So I think that was
Shut down.
so I think they have some explaining to do on that, but we know the answer to that.
Yeah, they don't care. They don't care.
All right, hold on.
We did not choose a war between dictators with rule of gun, invading democracies with rule of law. War criminal Putin has unleashed the full force of his government and security services to wage a shadow war against the democratic world, oppressing first, sadly, the people of Russia and imposing death and destruction on the free world. This is not a conflict waiting to happen. It is already underway. And war criminal Putin is testing the resolve of the Western civilization. In the past year, NATO has welcomed 2 dynamic members, with the addition of Sweden and Finland, each bringing their own expertise and defensive capabilities with them. It's also been said that NATO has never been stronger. Sadly, the free world is only as strong as its ability to deter and respond to threats and attacks as a defensive organization. War criminal Putin seeks to undermine NATO by advancing the same false escalation narrative he has pushed for decades, all while actively engaging in acts of sabotage and aggression against NATO countries. We must recognize that the Putin war is not limited to his genocidal invasion of Ukraine. We need to know and recognize that Russia has already threatened war on NATO soil. And this is, and we have with us an inexhaustive illustration of the Russian hybrid operations on NATO territory over just the last year. Putin is clear. His goal is to exhaust support for Ukraine so that he can oppress the talented Russian people, which is not to benefit the people of Russia, but to benefit the corrupt oligarchs, and attempt to recreate the failed Soviet empire. Russia already illegally occupies parts of the nation of Georgia, as well as Moldova, and has troops in Armenia as it threatens the NATO members of Estonia and Poland directly. As you can see, Russian hybrid warfare, including cyber attacks, disinformation, and sabotage, have escalated across NATO countries. From airspace violations on NATO's eastern flank to covert operations on critical infrastructure, the Kremlin's goal is clear: to destabilize and weaken the West. Russia is deliberately testing the strength of the alliance, and we must respond, and I know that we can respond with unity and to destabilize and weaken the West. The Russian government, permeated by intelligence agents, is operating on a war footing. It is not structured for good faith diplomatic engagement, but rather to undermine the very institutions we support. Today, we'll hear from experts who can help us better understand the nature of this conflict and how we can strengthen our defenses. And we will first be hearing from Michael Weiss, a renowned investigative journalist and author. Additionally, we're so grateful to have with us Dr. Benjamin Schmitt, Senior Fellow at the Kleiman Center for Energy Policy at the University of Pennsylvania. And we're also very grateful to have Erkki, the National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister of Estonia. I have a special fondness for Estonia. I actually, at one time, had a U.S. University of South Carolina student who was born in Tallinn. His dad was a doctor in the Soviet Navy. And I don't want to offend any of my Democrat colleagues here, but we used to joke he switched parties from the Communist Party to the Republican Party. And so times change, thank God. And so I'm really grateful we have with us Senator Smith, and we're also, hey, I'm so fortunate my co-chair, Congressman Stephen Cohen, all the way from Tennessee. And I'm so grateful for Congressman to be here with Emmanuel Cleaver from Missouri. And so Senator Schmitt, if you'd like to make any opening comment.
No, thank you. I'll wait for my questions.
Well, and we can't wait to hear from, thank you so much. We can't wait to hear from Congressman Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's good to have you back.
You're here.
He's a very Wilson's such a strong
You
supporter.
scared all of us.
Such a strong
Scared me.
supporter.
Well, thank you for convening this hearing and being here. In addition to waging genocidal war in Ukraine, Putin is simultaneously using asymmetric warfare and gray zone tactics against NATO, which is methods all too familiar with what the Soviet Union did during the Cold War. The same playbook that they used then, disinformation, espionage, targeted assassinations, is alive and well in Putin's Russia. Never forget, once KGB, always KGB. Putin was a KGB officer in the Soviet Union. In his mind, he's still the same person. He hadn't changed. We see attacks on dissidents, activists, and high-profile figures living abroad, which is intended to send a message that no one is outside of the range of the Kremlin. Alexei Navalny's former chief of staff, Leonid Volkov, was attacked with a hammer in Lithuania shortly after Navalny's death. The poisoning of political opponents like Vladimir Kara-Murza on 2 different occasions. And we've seen other poisonings in London and other places. Now more than ever, Putin wants to weaken and destabilize the West, so as we see him increasingly using his hybrid attacks. He's been orchestrating cyber attacks, targeting critical infrastructure. In January, he did such an attack in water facility in Texas that affected water there and also affected water flow system, supply systems in France and in Poland as well. He's also working hard on disinformation campaigns aimed at influencing political narratives. 2016 presidential election, Putin conducted foreign electoral interference to help his favorite candidate, Donald Trump, trying to do the same in our upcoming election. They'll probably use AI, and they'll use EM.
Yep.
For those of you who don't know what EM is, Elon Musk. U.S. intelligence reported that Moscow was targeting U.S. swing states, more advanced disinformation such as AI tools and authentic U.S. voices, EM, to shape the outcome in favor of Donald Trump. Ukraine is asking to use our weapons for offensive purposes, and I support the request. I think they need to go forward with offensive weapons to strike into Russia and bring the war home to the Russian people. This is ludicrousy to allow Russia to attack and kill Ukrainians, destroy cultural objects, destroy cities with reckless disregard for life. Hit schools, hit hospitals, hit senior facilities, and Ukraine is not supposed to go in to Russia. That's crazy. I mean, both your arms are tied behind your back and tied behind them, unfortunately, by my government, our government, which is supporting Ukraine, and we've done a lot, but we've been slow at doing it. I went to these classified briefings early on, quite interesting. But some of them, the people got up who know a lot more about these weapons than I do, and they said, we need to give them ATACMS. We need to give them ATACMS. Gave them to them like 6 months later. We need to give them HIMARS. We need to give them HIMARS. 6 months later. And then there were the F-16s and the Abrams tanks. It was all a delay and a delay and a delay. This war would have been much, much closer to ending on Ukraine's terms, but ending if we'd have given them those weapons earlier, because Putin responds to one thing, and that's when he's weak. He doesn't want to show it, but when he's weak, he'll consider some treaty, some response, some end to the war. And that's something we were told very clearly by Professor Sullivan at one of our last hearings. That's all, he's got to have weakness, and the weakness is getting those weapons. So I support getting allowing use our weapons as well as British and French to go in and take the war home to Russia and let them have an even, an appropriate, and perspective on what the war is. Is it really a special military operation, or is it a war? And they won't know what war is for. War is innocents getting killed and places being bombed and losing their lives. And until Ukraine brings it to Russia, they won't see it as a war. They'll see it as a special military operation in the second great patriotic war. Horse.
I think you meant Dr. Timothy Snyder, not Sullivan.
Yeah.
That concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair Stephen Cohen and Congressman Emmanuel Cleaver. If you'd like to make, okay, no further opening statements. We will immediately proceed to Mr. Michael Weiss. And hey, I want to alert everybody, we're going to be on a 5-minute rule applying to me too. And so 5 minutes of presentation, 5 minutes of questioning by each of us, and it'll be strictly maintained by the very professional staff we have here with Shannon Faulkner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The evocative adjective that precedes the word war in the title of this hearing, I think, is slightly misplaced. There's nothing shadowy about what's been going on for nearly 20 years. It's war that Russia has been waging across NATO and EU territory. And there's some notable features, I think, that we can define. First, the soldiers that Russia uses, or better say the perpetrators, have all been promoted, received state medals, or even been assigned cushy positions in the Russian presidential administration for their grim spade work. Some, to this day, are actively serving diplomats abroad. This war has almost always involved Ukraine, specifically Western efforts to arm Kyiv, both before, during, and after the full-scale invasion, beginning actually in 2011, even before the Russian takeover of Crimea. This war has killed or injured civilians and caused the evacuations of entire communities in 3 different NATO countries. It's involved sleeper agents deeply embedded within Western society who have aided and abetted terrorist operations. Now it is increasingly relying on native citizens of Western societies who are recruited remotely via social media to carry out these operations in exchange for modest sums. The most notorious example I can cite is one that I'm sure everyone's familiar with, which is the poisoning of Alexander Litvinenko in 2006 using a radioactive isotope, highly deadly, which was later discovered all over London, Hamburg, Germany, and on commercial airliners. That was an FSB operation, and the 2 men responsible, one of the men responsible, is currently in the Russian parliament as a reward for his efforts. No other team of Russian intelligence, though, has been more active in unleashing waves of violence across Europe in the last decade than the GRU's Unit 29155. This is a special black ops unit of Russia's military intelligence service. It consists almost exclusively of cutthroats and saboteurs. Their first bombing, which I alluded to already, was an ammunition storage facility in Lovnodal, Bulgaria. This was in 2011, in the midst of the Obama administration's reset with Russia, which was meant to stabilize relations with Moscow. And what did they blow up? Ammunition that was destined for 2 countries. The first was Georgia, which was then rearming itself after the 2008 war with Russia. And the second was Ukraine, still 3 years shy away from its revolution of dignity, and currently then under the administration of Viktor Yanukovych, a pro-Russian satrap. The explosives were actually planted not in Bulgaria, but in another storage facility in the Czech Republic, in the town of Vebrica. The ammunition, which was laden with these explosives, traveled almost 800 miles of European territory by truck, bypassing 4 major population centers, Bratislava, Belgrade, Budapest, and Sofia, which meant that had they gone off the bombs prematurely, they could have killed thousands, if not tens of thousands of people. In the event, 3 people were killed in Lovnodal, Bulgaria, 18 others injured, and the entire town had to be evacuated because of the blasts and the secondary explosions it caused. 3 years later, in 2014, 29155 blew up that facility in the Czech Republic where they originally planted their bombs. This set off 50 metric tons of material, including ammunition, again, you guessed it, destined for Ukraine, but also ammunition and munitions destined for anti-Assad rebels in Syria. The explosion was so massive and it led to secondary blasts that were so big that rescue workers couldn't actually reach the site for 10 days. How did the saboteurs from 29155 gain access to that facility? Well, they had recruited a family of illegals known as the Shapashnikovs, who burrowed deep into Czech society for decades. The Shapashnikovs, by the way, even bought themselves a holiday rental retreat, a Greek villa, which 29155 used as its safe house. By the way, that property is still on booking sites if anyone in the commission is interested in a holiday. 29155 also carried out perhaps half a dozen operations of this nature all across the Czech Republic and Bulgaria until about 2015. One that destroyed forensic evidence of their earlier crimes before they decided ultimately that they wanted to go to the source and eliminate the arms dealer who was manufacturing and selling weapons to Ukraine and Georgia. This was Emilian Gebrev, a man I've interviewed and profiled. He's the CEO of a company called EMCO, and they poisoned him with a Novichok-like substance in 2015, along with his son and factory manager. That was 3 years before they would use actual Novichok to poison Sergei and Yulia Skripal in Salisbury, a quaint English cathedral town. The two poisoners in that operation, Alexander Mishkin and Anatoly Chapiga, were in fact the guys who blew up the Czech storage facility in Vebrice in 2015. So notice a pattern. They keep returning to the scenes of their crimes. They keep recycling the same operatives to do all kinds of other operations, including assassinations. One of the guys who poisoned Emilian Gebrev, by the way, led an abortive insurrection attempt in Montenegro in 2016 on the eve of that country's accession to NATO. In 2019, an FSB assassin, someone my investigative team at The Insider believes was and is Vladimir Putin's personal hitman, a guy called Vadim Krasikov, gunned down a Chechen dissident and former military commander named Zelenheim Kangashvili, again in broad daylight in the middle of Berlin's Tiergarten Park. Krasikov, you'll know, it was recently traded back to Russia in exchange for our own citizens and some Russian dissidents. But so badly did Putin want him, which is telling, that he was ready to give up Alexei Navalny, the now dead leader of the Russian opposition, for Krasikov. Well, the GRU has found it difficult lately to travel to Europe owing to the fact that they've been rolled up and exposed and sanctioned, and they're on the radar of every major counterintelligence organization. So what are they doing now? Well, the bad news is they're taking a leaf from the playbook of non-state actors such as ISIS, recruiting remotely using social media platforms like Telegram, asking agents to carry out bombings, acts of provocation, acts of subversion all across Europe, and paying them in cryptocurrency for as little as 400 euros. Known acts that have been reported on, again, all across NATO territory: setting fire to a shopping center in Warsaw, an IKEA warehouse in Vilnius, a bus depot in Prague, an industrial estate in East London, and a metals factory in Berlin. I was recently part of an investigation that anatomized the Latvian network of agents that the GRU has been recruiting, relying on court documents from Latvia and Estonia. And these are kids, as young as 18 years old, riffraff, amateurs with criminal backgrounds. They were asked in one instance to travel to Kyiv in January of 2022, a month before the full-scale invasion, and firebomb a military facility. They have daubed graffiti on the wall of the NATO Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence in Tallinn, suggesting that that institution had been hacked by a well-known Russian hacking group. They never met their handlers because, again, they're doing this remotely online. And it didn't take much to bring them on board to do these kinds of operations, again, against their own countries. These are native Latvian citizens. But Russian spies and operatives are still in our midst, and they're still getting up to their old tricks. The Wall Street Journal reported recently that the CEO of the German arms giant Rheinmetall has been earmarked for assassination. Now, I wonder why that is. It probably has something to do with the fact that Germany has been outsized in its security assistance to Ukraine against all of Russia's expectations and much to its chagrin. This summer, the French arrested a man called Kirill Gryaznov. He's a cordon bleu trained chef who's been living in France for over a decade. He's also a social media influencer and a sometime reality dating star in Russian television. In fact, he's an FSB illegal who boasted in a drunken dinner to a friend that he was about to carry off a kinetic operation in Paris on the eve of the Summer Olympics. They'll have, quote, an opening ceremony like no other, he said, just before he flashed his FSB badge. And you'll notice in France, by the way, other Russian operations, the graffitiing of Stars of David on walls to drum up fears of anti-Semitism, coffins draped with the French tricolor to denounce the Macron policy of possibly sending troops to Ukraine, a guy who blew himself up in a hotel room near Charles de Gaulle Airport. These things are continuing to happen even as we speak. But nothing is new here because the GRU has been trying to overthrow democratically elected governments since its founding in 1918. In the 1920s, they fomented insurrections in Germany. They recruited Communist Party members who they then trained to do exactly these kinds of operations. They had so-called T units. The T stood for terrorism. So the tradecraft isn't new. What's new is the technological capability. And I'm sorry to say, I think the West has been very non-vigilant in paying attention to these operations. I mean, much of what we know by looking in the rearview mirror going back, again, over a decade. And we're still piecing together things that these guys have got up to. And the scary part is not what we know they've done, it's what we don't know they've done yet. Assassinations, fire bombings, sabotage operations that have yet to be documented. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Weiss, and that really has been eye-opening, and I want to commend the Helsinki staff. Equally eye-opening is the map that we have behind us indicating different sabotage attacks that the dots need to be connected. And to continue with connecting dots, Dr. Schmitt.
Thank you, Chairman Wilson, Ranking Member Cohen, and distinguished Senate and House members of the U.S. Helsinki Commission. I have to say, Mr. Wilson, is nothing short of heroic that you're here today. Thank you so much, and it shows just how important this topic is. So thank you so much. It's inspiring. We meet exactly 943 days since the Putin regime unleashed its expanded onslaught of human misery in Ukraine. That's 943 times, 943 chances that we could have done more to stop Russia's overt kinetic strikes against Ukrainian energy systems. Russia's campaign against Ukraine's civil energy infrastructure epitomizes the Kremlin's long-standing weaponization of energy, the hallmarks of which have included security of supply threats, monopolistic practices, disinformation, and the corruption and capture of elites. We must urgently do everything possible to support Ukraine's air defense and long-range strike capability before this winter so that the Kremlin is unable to further expand the humanitarian nightmare that it has caused across Ukraine. But while pursuing its hot war in Ukraine, another war is being waged by Putin's Kremlin, a shadow war in which it is targeting energy and critical infrastructure through sabotage on NATO soil with impacts across land, sea, and space domains. The unprecedented scale and scope of this ongoing sabotage spree by Russian-attributed and Russia-suspected actors is being undertaken to create panic and undermine support for Ukrainian victory across the West every day. Congress needs to use today's hearing as a starting point to support actions that make it clear to the Kremlin that its sabotage campaign to intimidate democracy ends here.
Amen.
My name is Dr. Benjamin L. Schmitt, and I've previously served as European Energy Security Advisor at the U.S. Department of State. I'm now a senior fellow at the University of Pennsylvania with appointments in both the Department of Physics and Astronomy and the Kleiman Center for Energy Policy, where I conduct physics and energy security research and teach graduate coursework on energy geopolitics and national security. For the past 18 months, I have led a Penn research project focused on analyzing how the Russian Federation now brazenly conducts clandestine physical sabotage attacks against energy and critical infrastructure across the NATO alliance. This work includes studying policies, technologies, and open source intelligence methods, including maritime automatic identification system data and commercial geospatial imagery data that can be developed and used to counter Kremlin hybrid warfare tactics. I've also conducted a field research expedition that is continental in scope, meeting with experts and officials and visiting critical infrastructure facilities across Europe, including those that have experienced physical sabotage incidents and those that want to prevent it from happening in the future. 4 such stops have become central case studies to my research. They provide key examples of the multispectral challenges that exist with infrastructure monitoring, protection, and attribution. For example, these stops have included, number 1, I traveled to the Norwegian island of Svalbard, just 400 miles from the North Pole, where on January 7th, 2022, a Russian fishing trawler was likely responsible for severing a vital subsea fiber optic cable transmitting commercial satellite data from the Svalsat ground station to the European mainland. That commercial data would prove vital in Ukraine's defense just weeks later. This incident also highlights growing Kremlin maritime doctrine to utilize so-called commercial or research vessels for espionage and sabotage in the European offshore. Number 2, I crisscrossed the Gulf of Finland and visited sites on both ends of the Baltic Connector natural gas pipeline that links Finland and Estonia. There, in early October 2023, a Chinese flag vessel with Russian ownership, escorted by a Russian nuclear-powered icebreaker, dragged an anchor for hundreds of kilometers, severing telecommunications cables and destroying the Baltic Connector pipeline itself. Number 3, just a few weeks ago, earlier this month, I chartered a vessel from Denmark's island of Bornholm for an expedition to gather seabed sonar data directly at the site of the September 2022 subsea destruction of the Kremlin-backed Nord Stream 2 pipeline, perhaps the highest profile energy sabotage incident to date. Attribution of that blast remains a subject of heated debate, and early findings from this study call into question some of the current narratives. And fourth and finally, I visited the Brunsbüttel LNG terminal in Germany. Construction of that terminal was meant to reduce Germany's energy dependence on Russia. But in late 2023, an onshore pipeline meant to connect the terminal to the German grid was found drilled through. And just last month, just a few weeks ago, Russian military-grade intelligence drones were spotted flying over the terminal. These examples join dozens of others that have taken place in recent months, from an explosives cache with detonators found deliberately buried next to the NATO pipeline network just south of Heidelberg, Germany, to incidents in Poland, the Czech Republic, France, and the United Kingdom, where attribution has been made against Russian actors as well as non-Russian nationals that have been hired online on social media, on Telegram, by Russia's military intelligence, or the GRU. Commissioners, it is time that NATO leaders turn the table on the Putin regime in terms of its hybrid warfare campaign and move from Russia's summer of sabotage to NATO's autumn of action. To this end, I leave you with these recommendations. Number one, Congress should support the invocation of NATO Article 4 consultative mechanisms from concerned NATO member states to respond to sabotage incidents officially attributed to the Kremlin or Kremlin-backed entities. Number two, Congress must extend existing sanctions on the Kremlin-backed Nord Stream 2 pipeline that will otherwise sunset this year and reverse the 2021 Biden administration decision to avoid sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 construction vessel, the Blue Ship, and its then owner, the quote, Stiftung Klima- und Umweltschutz MV. Number three, Congress should pass urgent legislation to end, finally, the ability of former U.S. officials from leaving office to work for U.S. adversaries like the Russian Federation ever again. And fourth, and finally, Congress must pressure the Biden administration to allow Ukrainian military to conduct necessary long-distance strikes against Russian military launch facilities who will otherwise continue to terror bomb Ukrainian energy infrastructure. Through these actions, we can both deter further Kremlin sabotage and support Ukrainian victory, and make it clear to those that would propose otherwise, there can never again be a return to business as usual of Putin's Kremlin, ever. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Wow.
Thank you very much,
Wow.
Dr. Schmitt.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, no media coverage that you need to
Yeah,
talk about.
and the thing is that the media doesn't cover
And
a lot of
again,
these
we're so
things that
grateful
have been
and
going on.
honored to have the National Security Advisor, Tori, here today, and just Estonia.
Mr. Chairman, distinguished commissioners and members of Congress, I would like to thank for the opportunity to testify today on Russia's shadow war. As this is my first time before this esteemed institution, I would like to begin by expressing my gratitude to you and the American people for your steadfast support for Estonia. From not recognizing the Soviet occupation after the Second World War, to standing with us in our fight for freedom in 1991, to supporting our accession to NATO in 2004. We would not be such a vibrant, tech-savvy democracy without your support. It is this shared history and experience that drives our unwavering support for Ukraine and our firm advocacy of Ukraine's membership in NATO. Bringing Ukraine into NATO is not an escalation, vice versa. Leaving Ukraine in a gray zone only plays into Russia's hand. Ladies and gentlemen, moving on to today's topic. Russia's goals vis-à-vis the West have been clear for a number of years. Their aim is the rollback of the Pax Americana through dismantling and rewriting the Euro-Atlantic security architecture. To achieve this goal, Russia has been using various elements of the shadow war, which in the past year has intensified. Russia's activities include sabotage and acts of violence on European territory, creating migration problems at our borders, cyber and electronic interference, disinformation campaigns, and other subversive actions. Various proxies are used to mask Russia's involvement. These proxies are usually low-level and expendable, and if they are important and not expendable, then hostages may be used to exchange them, like happened in Estonia with the security officer in 2014. We estimate that the volume of these activities will continue and may become more brutal. Estonia is a target of the Russian shadow war. To bring a concrete example, in 2023, Russian intelligence services carried out a coordinated operation to undermine Estonia's security through physical attacks on property, including that of an Estonian government minister. Some of these attacks were prevented, while others were carried out. The aim of the operation was to create tensions within the Estonian society and erode trust in government institutions. As of today, those responsible for the attacks have been prosecuted. Estonia's approach is to stay calm and confident, but vigilant. Russia's activities are not limited to NATO border countries like Estonia. Similar methods are used more broadly across Europe and beyond. My message is clear. These acts should not be dismissed as minor or one-time acts of hooliganism. These are intentional actions demonstrating that Russia considers itself in a war with the West. Recognizing and responding to Russia's hybrid activities is crucial, as doing nothing encourages Russia to continue and escalate its actions. Therefore, I urge to form a common strategy. Our responses can be national, regional, or collective within NATO and the EU, and don't need to mirror Russia's actions. They can be asymmetric if needed. In Estonia, we see countering Russia's shadow war first and foremost as a national responsibility. Our response focuses on strengthening resilience through both military and non-military efforts, including the resilience of our energy infrastructure. Our deterrence posture has been strengthened through our own defense enhancements, with defense expenditure to remain around 3.5% of GDP for the foreseeable future. Internationally, we see that we're on the right path. Discussions on Russian hybrid activities have gained momentum within NATO, the EU, and among key allies. Our focus must be on 3 A's: acknowledgement, assessment, and attribution. We must also have countermeasures in place to hold Russia accountable. Acknowledgement and public attribution of Russian offenses are key. Though not always easy, they raise public awareness and demonstrate to Russia that such actions will not be unpunished. These measures should be tailored and backed by a clear communication strategy to send a clear message that Russia should not test our limits. Estonia has urged countries to develop and adopt countermeasures. For example, in the EU, we support the swift implementation of the hybrid sanctions regime, and Czechia has a proposal to limit Russian diplomatic accreditations. Following the decisions made at the NATO summit in Washington, we look forward to implementing additional actions to address Russian shadow war against NATO and the allies. I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, National Security Advisor Tori. And indeed, it's a dream come true. I'm so grateful that the United States never recognized the Soviet occupation of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. We always, from 1940, recognized that the Baltic republics were independent countries. But even better, I've visited, and gosh, you have fulfilled our hopes and dreams for the people of Estonia, of dynamic economies, opportunities for young people. I've actually been to the border at Narva and on the Narva River. Gosh, to see what a dynamic country. It's just so exciting. As we begin, it's very appropriate. The first person got here, and who would have ever imagined a member of the Senate? And so we will proceed to Senator Tina Smith of Minnesota.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I am chronically prompt, but I very much appreciate your courtesy. Thanks also to my fellow commissioners on the Helsinki Commission, and thanks to you, our testifiers today, for being here. We appreciate this very much. So Russia has extensively used disinformation and election interference as tools of hybrid war to destabilize NATO allies and to undermine democratic processes. Could you comment on how Russian disinformation campaigns have targeted public opinion in democratic societies, particularly regarding support for Ukraine, and what measures should we be looking at to strengthen resilience to these narratives? And you could also maybe comment on what democratic governments can proactively do to protect their electoral processes for these kinds of interference. Mr. Weiss, I'll start with you.
Sure. Well, I think disinformation goes hand in hand with human intelligence operations. So all of the acts of sabotage and state terrorism, we should call it what it is, that I've alluded to, are designed in a kind of heads I win, tails you lose scheme. So heads I win. They managed to blow up weapons manufacturing plants, ammunition depots, anything that's involved in security assistance to Ukraine. That's a net positive for the Russians. Tails you lose, even if they fail, we're sat here talking about acts of state terrorism on European soil. It's scary stuff. It makes populations nervous. It makes them paranoid. And this is designed, it's sort of baked into the cake, if you like, to lower and weaken Western support for Ukraine. In fact, I can tell you, a lot of European countries are very reluctant to come forward with the full scale and scope of these operations that have been unmasked because of that fact. They're worried that their population simply will say it's time to give up on Kyiv, enough is enough.
Right.
In terms of election interference, look, I think the Department of Justice did, and the Department of State actually in the last few weeks have done very admirable efforts in disclosing these influence operations, which not only have gone after Russian intelligence officers embedded in their state media apparatus, RT, but have also kind of implicitly acknowledged that Americans have been recruited to purvey these influence operations in exchange for exorbitant sums of money. I mean, I've been a podcaster in the past, and I wish somebody would give me $400,000 per episode or YouTube video or whatever. Look, I think my esteemed fellow testifier from Estonia, the Estonians have done a superb job, not just at counterintelligence, but at pushing back on Russian influence operations. And one thing they do, and it's a little bit controversial, is every year their internal security service puts out an annual review. Every year, by the way, they catch at least 1 or 2 Russian spies. Other countries in Europe catch 0 per year. So either the Russians are spying only in Estonia or other counterintelligence agencies aren't doing a very good job. But they also name and shame people that they know are coming to Estonia to peddle these lines, to push a pro-Kremlin narrative exactly designed to weaken democratic resolve, weaken support for Ukraine, et cetera, et cetera. I think our government could be doing a lot better simply in terms of acting as a clearinghouse from an intelligence point of view of what we know the Russians are up to, but aren't necessarily criminal acts in the United States.
Mr. Tori, would you also please comment on this and what you've seen in your country and what more we should be doing to build resilience against these
we don't even cover a lot of this stuff in our
disinformation
media.
campaigns?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Actually, my code testimony giver, Mr. Weiss, already mentioned many important things, but it may seem a bit naive, but we have found the best weapon against disinformation to be open and straightforward communication, to really talk about the issues that.
Yeah, again, our media doesn't do much of that at all.
Current way.
They do spread a lot of Russian misinformation, though.
And public contribution to those that are trying to peddle the stories and lies that diminish the public trust to government institutions. So open and straightforward communication.
Thank you very much. So shining light on the disinformation, pointing it out as a key strategy, I'm hearing you say. Mr. Schmitt, I just have a couple seconds left, but if I'd welcome anything you'd like to add.
Yeah, I'll just say that when we think about disinformation and we talk about sabotage and all of these sort of different elements of Russia's hybrid war, this is all one thing for the Kremlin. They use a multidisciplinary, multispectral approach where they connect the sabotage with disinformation. And I think on the Baltic connector sabotage front, where we saw the Chinese flag vessel New Polar Bear with Russian ownership, escorted by the Russian nuclear-powered Arctic-class container ship Sevmorput, basically break all of these cables and pipelines. The Finns and the Estonians were amazing at their strategic communications to get ahead of Kremlin narratives that would have stoked fear and gone outside of what we've seen in open source intelligence, commercial satellite data, and AIS tracking, and they released this early and often. We didn't see that in the Nord Stream case, and we have certainly not seen this in the case of many of these other sabotage incidents over the summer.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Thank you, Senator, so much, and we appreciate your involvement on the commission very much too. Thank you. As we proceed, as I begin with my 5 minutes, I want to appreciate so many people being so thoughtful, and it's been bipartisan support. They now have a bionic chairman, and so even some Democrats were nice. So, but the bottom line, again, I'm really grateful. And then this is bipartisan. Now, we may disagree, I can't believe it, with Congressman Cohen about that courageous American hero, Elon Musk, but we do agree on long-range ATACMS, and international law is very clear, and that is that launch sites are targetable wherever they are. If they're and a country, as I've told my friends from Turkey, they have a right to defend themselves. from launch sites that may be in the Kurdish region of Iraq. But whatever the case is, that over and over again, the ability of countries to protect themselves. And so it has been very bipartisan. And I know that the ranking member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, I'm grateful that working together, we have over and over again, and Adam Schmitt with the Armed Services Committee, over and over again, people have expressed support for the long-range capability of defense. With that in mind, another situation, I want to commend the Helsinki staff. It's remarkable the level of sabotage attacks that have been revealed, because it really doesn't get attention. But I think maps and diagrams are very, very helpful. And I sadly, it really came to fore with the Houthi attacks on South Korean, Japanese, Indian trade routes, and it was missed. Over 150 attacks. But if you get a map, you can actually see it. And so, and then U.S. Navy too. But then also I appreciate AEI did a study of connecting the dots of the dictators working together. And so over and over again, things can come together. But a concern I have is that sometimes it seems very esoteric. And so each of you, I would like, as you all have been so eloquent in describing the sabotage attacks, as we talk about infrastructure, again, that sounds esoteric. It sounds like it doesn't relate to real people. I want you to think, each one of you, of an attack that could relate to a family, whether it be a family in the United States or a family in Estonia, wherever, and any of our NATO allies. And so I'll begin with Mr. Weiss and shall proceed. But a specific attack that could relate to on infrastructure that it could affect the average American family.
Well, in my first testimony, I mentioned several shopping malls, bus depots, soft civilian targets all across Europe have been attacked by GRU remote-controlled saboteurs. Coming soon to a theater near you. I mean, when I talk to American law enforcement and counterintelligence officers, they say that they're surprised we haven't seen cases like this in the American homeland. So you can imagine, sir, that all the GRU would have to do is find some willing accomplices to blow up a shopping center. I live in New York, a lot of soft targets there, Times Square, transportation hubs. And what the Russians would do is they would immediately blame this on us. It's a false flag attack designed to drum up Russophobia, or they would blame it on ISIS or Al Qaeda or a non-state actor, a terrorist organization. And we'd be so caught up in the paranoia and fear that this would engender that it would be very difficult to get to the bottom of it and to have consensus, more importantly, because our country is so divided about what is fact and what is disinformation.
But thank you for making it real world. And Dr. Schmitt.
Thank you, Congressman. This is a great question. And I will say what is happening in Europe now is coming soon to the United States or may already be here. I have an example that affected me personally. I was at a conference speaking about European energy security and in particular countering Russian sabotage on energy and critical infrastructure in Europe in Bonn, Germany in January of this year. I needed to fly home to the United States for another conference. And the train that I was going to use from the Siegburg Bonn station to the Frankfurt airport, I logged on to get my ticket and everything on that line was canceled because there was sabotage. The power cables were cut. This can impact people. It is frightening what's going on in the energy space. It can create energy poverty, but at the same time, we can have direct impacts on the population, and the disinformation and the ability of Russia to undermine our democracy are absolutely at stake.
Thank you. And National Security Advisor Tori.
Just like to add two concrete points. First of all, in Estonia and our part of the world, we have seen electronic warfare interference in GPS signaling, which directly affects the air traffic as well as marine traffic. So that is. And the second point that I would like to highlight is lawfare. Russia has placed the previous Estonian Prime Minister, Ms. Kaja Kallas, the future EU foreign policy chief, on a wanted list that leaves open a possibility for an international arrest warrant in the future. So targeting specific people is something that they do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And indeed, the American people, really Western civilization, need to know that there's a potential that can affect every family. With that in mind, I'm going to show you all how bipartisan we can be. I'm going to recognize Congressman Co-Chair Stephen Cohen.
I appreciate that. I'm going to yield to Mr. Cleaver now, and I'll take my time because he didn't take his opening statement.
See what a generous individual he is. Congressman Emmanuel Cleaver, all the way from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Cohen. And thank you for being here to enlighten us. And I have a number of questions, but I think I would really like to start with Mr. Weiss, just to be helpful. Can you distinguish between or provide me with an understanding of the difference between the GRU and the KGB?
They're the same.
Intelligence. It's been around since 1918 when it was the Soviet military intelligence, founded on the orders of Vladimir Lenin. Historically been a little bit rivalrous and competitive with the former KGB, which is now two different intelligence services, both civilian. One is the FSB, which I'm sure everyone here has heard of, and the other is the SVR, which is their foreign intelligence service. But we have found evidence, both in the past and more recently, of cooperation and collaboration between and among these services. But the GRU was founded essentially for one reason, and that was to prepare for war with the West. They were sort of at the vanguard of fomenting insurrections in the 1920s all across Europe. Most of them failed, but they did, in their wake, create these cadres of operatives that could be relied upon to do deep strikes behind enemy lines, partisan warfare. It's an instrument of the Russian military, and as such, it should be treated as a military organization.
Yeah, it's intriguing. At another time, I'd just be interested in Putin's appreciation of the two. And there's no question he's the leader of both. But Dr. Schmitt, and this is an argument that's taking place on this Hill and probably around the country. If the U.S. does, in fact, provide the Ukraine with weapons that would reach targets deep inside Russia, why would Russian leaders not then authorize the use of weapons that could wreak havoc all over Europe? Because it would very likely, draw NATO in. So what? I hear the call, and I'm sympathetic to what you said and to others, but I'm also listening to some Americans, and some are in government, some want to be in government, who are saying, be careful.
Well, Congressman, I absolutely agree. We should be careful and thoughtful about this. But let's step back and look at the fact that since day one, and your colleague, Mr. Cohen, has pointed this out. Look, I'm a physicist by training, so I do this in math. This is an x-1 equation, where x is what we should have been doing at any given moment, and x-1 is our one step behind. We've always been one step behind where we need to do and support Ukraine. That's resulted in 80% of the thermal power stations in Ukraine being destroyed, 50% of electricity capacity. It has created energy poverty and humanitarian crisis, the likes of which we have not seen since the Second World War in a country. And frankly, by allowing the Ukrainians to strike not only the missiles that are incoming, but the facilities that are launching these attacks on Ukrainian energy infrastructure, it is absolutely part of the energy security humanitarian crisis management that we need to be doing. And at the same time, we really are seeing that we're still just not doing enough. And it's going to cost us a lot more as the transatlantic community to rebuild the entire Ukrainian energy grid than it will be to protect it now. So we better do as much as we can, as fast as we can, to ensure Ukraine's energy security and help it towards victory.
What would discourage what would discourage Russia from authorizing the use of some bombs that could create mass destruction, not necessarily even a nuclear?
Yeah, no, I think that's an absolute part of this equation. And what we have to remember is that the Ukrainians have quote unquote gone through the red lines of the Russian Federation many times. Every one of the weapon systems that were mentioned earlier were red lines supposedly of Vladimir Putin, and he has not struck back in a way that is massive because he can't, right? The Ukrainians have gone into Kursk and actually seized part of the Russian Federation's territory. There is a war going on. It is this shadow war, and these sabotage operations continue to happen from the North Pole to the Baltic Sea, to the Barents Sea, to the North Sea, and everywhere on shore in Europe. And you know, we need to just remember that the best thing that we can do to push back on this is ensure that Ukraine wins and Russia loses its war against democracy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And thank you very much, Congressman Cleaver. We appreciate your service so much. We now proceed to Congressman Co-Chair Steve Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I follow up with Mr. Schmitt. I'm presuming that the Congressman Cleaver was referring to the op-ed by the Kennedy Jr. and Trump Jr. And they suggested in their op-ed. Did you read it by chance, Mr. Schmitt? You didn't miss a lot. It was pretty sophomoric, not junior. And they said something that started with the fact that said that there never should have been a war. The war shouldn't have been allowed to start. Well, they should have told that to Izvestia, not to the Politico. You know, there's nothing that Ukraine could do but defend itself, and Russia came in lying to the last day that they weren't going to invade. You're not concerned. I mean, he's threatened nuclear response. A person like Putin, who is like one of the only people that really have a large nuclear arsenal, would know the results of a nuclear war would come back on them, correct?
That's right. Immediate loss of that war in Ukraine were a nuclear weapon to be used by the Russian Federation.
And there would be a response by
NATO, the U.S., the entire Western alliance. Absolutely.
Right, nuclear attacks against Russia.
Possibly.
So they might even get his ballerina girlfriend. So
I don't want to comment on the ballerina girlfriend or the comments of RFK Jr. or the former president's son. So I will keep it at that.
Right, but
The Russians just had a nasty failure of their Sarmat, which is their main rocket.
Likely at that
blew up in sight.
They have engaged. They're basically at war with us anyway.
Absolutely.
But they don't want to get into a full-scale war with NATO. And that's
No, that'd be done.
But Mr. Weiss has clearly shown, and you have too, things they've done, him mostly in personal attacks and you in physical attacks. Have all those attacks that you mentioned with the cutting the cords there and on the bottom of the ocean floor, have they been recognized as Russian attacks?
That is a massive question, and many of them have. Many of them have a significant amount of evidence that points towards Russia, and many have been unattributed. And I will point out that certain countries along NATO's eastern flank have been quicker to attribute and release data. I think Estonia has been part of this effort, but certainly Poland, the Czech Republic, and of course we've seen the United Kingdom do this. And that's why we really need to see Article 4 used. I've heard that there is pressure within NATO to not allow certain countries to use Article 4, and that is, again, not a military response, but a consultative mechanism to raise the public cost and understanding of the Putin regime, that we know what's going on. We know these sabotage operations are coming from you, and we will do something to push back. And so to any of those in Washington, in Berlin, and elsewhere that are the escalation managers that we've heard so much about, that want to stop Article 4 from happening, it needs to happen. It's something that we can use. It's a tool, and it can be collectively used by NATO member states that have seen these attacks take place. But I will say, open source intelligence is so important to quicken that response, because commercial satellite data in this new commercial space renaissance that we have is something that we can release instantly. It's online, and we can look at the data and the evidence of these attacks and get that out way faster than declassifying military intelligence and other data that we have.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Weiss, have you looked into anything about the death of Navalny? Any research there?
My team at the Insider, which the head of the investigations unit is Christo Grozev, the man who identified Navalny's FSB poisoners and was in an Academy Award-winning documentary about that. We're currently investigating his demise. We don't agree with the U.S. intelligence assessment that it was accidental.
Did anybody get a chance to see his body after it was taken from the mortuary?
I believe his body was returned to his family, but I mean, the chain of custody from his death in the Gulag to that point is the real question. I don't know. I don't have details on sort of what might have happened forensically to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the head of the prison got a medal.
They've never shown really who
Wow.
was responsible for
Didn't know that.
killing Nemtsov, although they think it was the Chechens, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Sure.
there is some evidence that the Chechens, but in league with the FSB.
Yep.
Travel patterns are essential in understanding Russian intelligence operations, including those that have a violent or kinetic nature to them.
And I don't think, I guess my time's up, but on this map, they show Madrid, but they don't show, I think there was a Russian soldier who was killed like on the coast in Spain.
I just got back. I was in Alicante this summer doing an investigation into the murder of
That was the helicopter pilot that defected.
Yes, Spain is a deeply penetrated country. I mentioned Alexander Litvinenko. Well, one of the things he was doing before he was poisoned with polonium-210 was helping the Spanish counterterrorism authorities and counter-organized crime anatomize the extent of the Russian mafia in Spain. And the Russian mafia in Spain doesn't lift a finger without the help of Russian government officials and Russian intelligence organs.
Well, thank you for your work, Dr. Schmitt, as well. And it's good to see, I've been to your country, I've met your leadership, they're fantastic, but it's good that they've got a man too.
Thank you, Co-Chair. And indeed, Co-Chair Cohen has proven his capabilities of actually adding to the map. I'm very, very impressed. But hey, as we conclude, again, it's a dream come true to me. I, being an election observer, June 10, 1990, in Bulgaria, and to see the most slavish Soviet satellite now become a very modern country with opportunities for young people, that's not what I saw. When I got there, it was like stepping back to the 1930s. And then flash forward to visit Tbilisi and Georgia, the nation of Georgia, how exciting to see what a dynamic country Georgia is, and then to meet the Georgian military that have served with American military forces, how exciting and how dynamic the people are of the nation of Georgia. Even visiting up to Gori to see where at Stalin's birthplace, sadly, where the Russian Federation and war criminal Putin have intruded into their country. But over and over again, indeed, NATO is going to be stronger. And at this time, as we conclude, I'd like to invite our witnesses to please come forward, and we'll get a picture together with the members of the commission who are here. And I'm still hoping, hey, I want to, trying to scheduling things here is really difficult. But previously we had Congressman Mark Vesey from the Republic of Texas. He was here, and I know he intended to come back. And indeed, we so appreciate all of you being here, and just in every way, what you're doing, and the persons here who are encouraging freedom and democracy and peace through strength in the world.
Would you yield for a question?
Of course.
Mr. Weiss mentioned some spot, was it in Romania, where there's a kind of an Airbnb that's been kept?
No, in Greece, actually.
In Greece. Didn't you stay there with Rohrbacher?
No. Hey, I can't believe the.
By the way, it's listed as kid-friendly on the
the disinformation. But aside from that, we do get along, okay? But bottom line, thank all of you for being here, and I want to thank the commission staff. Poor things. We are Congress. Tomorrow afternoon around 5 o'clock, you'll notice weeping here on Capitol Hill as the members of Congress depart back to the promised land of Missouri and Tennessee and South Carolina. But we appreciate their great work, and what a great year it's been. One of the highlights for me, I appreciate that we had a field hearing at Nuremberg, the courthouse in Germany, and courtroom 600, the very courtroom where the Nazi war criminals were tried. And this commission had a morning session. We were very grateful with Bundestag members and others to be there to have a presentation on the kidnapping of Ukrainian children by war criminal Putin to Russify, and then general war crimes in the afternoon. And so I just want to thank the commission staff as we proceed for the next couple of weeks, and then with the elections and then reorganization. And at this time, we are adjourned.
Yeah, well done.
Just gonna mute it, obviously, unless they have. Yeah. Okay.
I think what struck me was all the stuff that they mentioned, all the actions that are being committed. People who follow it, like myself, are aware of that, but I think most people in the world don't even associate or follow all these sabotage acts and everything else. PSYOPs, psychological operations, is basically what the Russians are waging against the West, and the whole thing is to destroy faith in democracy. They don't care whether it's Republicans or the Democrats or whoever. They just want us to fight each other, which they've been very successful at doing. And in Lithuania, they got the parties also going at each other's throats, accusing each other of all kinds of things.
Everything.
Yeah, everything in the book. From everything from pedophilia to God knows what. So, it's we have to understand that we are at war with them in the information age and with the social media and everything else that they're doing. So it's not a question of that. So how do we fight back against this? This is the hard part, because in the United States we are limited. We can't use psychological operations by our military, who are pretty much very good at it, within our own country.
Mm-hmm.
They can only use it, by the way, in case of declared war. They can use psychological operations, PSYOPs, and information warfare. So how do we fight back against what the Russians are doing? We got to give it media attention, and that's one of the areas where we're kind of weak. I think in the beginning, Ukraine was really good at waging information war and PSYOPs. They did a good job, but then all of a sudden, I noticed a change of tone in our media. They kind of, go up and down whether the Ukrainians are doing something good. All of a sudden, the Ukrainians can't win, blah blah blah, and they can think of all the reasons why they should make peace and give away part of their country.
Yeah.
Those people just don't understand. Like in World War II, when we gave Hitler something, it didn't stop him; it just encouraged him. And I'm totally 100% convinced that as long as Putin is in power, this war will not end.
Yeah.
So the thing is, unless he's comes up against the wall where he knows he's going to lose, and if he knows he's going to lose, then his cohorts surrounding him know he's going to lose, and they're going to remove him because. Right. They don't want to be part of that losing thing, and he knows that. So he's riding on a tiger, as they say, and he can't get off, because as soon as he gets off, he's going to be eaten. And like they mentioned in the hearings, this whole thing can be over if Putin just said, "Okay, we're sending our troops back home. We've accomplished. We denazified Ukraine. We liberated some, blah blah blah." But he can't do that, because basically he says, we were going in there to protect the Russian speakers. Well, I speak Russian. Does he need to protect me? I guess, should he come to the United States and protect my rights? No, the Russian-speaking canard is stupidity personified, but he uses that. The denazification is an excuse. And basically, the Donbass area is very, very rich in all kinds of minerals and oil and uranium and precious minerals and stuff like that. So he wanted to get that to pass on to his, supporters, the oligarchs and everything else, and continue raping the country of Ukraine instead of just Russia. So That was one of the things it's all about, and the other thing is he's not trying to spread the Soviet Union. He's trying to spread the Russian Empire. And if you look at the Russian Empire, it included Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Poland, and a few other territories, parts of Finland, even. So that's it's the Imperial Russia, not the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was a little bit smaller than the Imperial Russia. So we got our hands full as far as what we have to do and what we have to support and how we have to help out people understand what's going on.
Yeah. So everybody that's watching, you need to share this video and these points that were discussed. Just some of the notes that I took was Michael Weiss said the GRU has been in business since 1918 and they've not been out of business. So yeah, I think we're definitely seeing that. The discussion from Dr. Schmitt, the energy person, talking about Nord Stream being sabotaged, which we don't know what the actual result is, and we might not know for some time. Going back to also Michael Weiss talking about the different factories and locations that were destroyed and sabotaged. We don't know until many years later.
Yeah, well, we've had some dry runs in this country where power plants, control panels were sabotaged. We are not in a good position in the United States because our energy infrastructure has not been hardened. Our computer systems, some of this stuff runs on open source computer systems, and we've seen what the Israelis did to the Iranians with infiltrating their computer system and shutting down their centrifuges. So that stuff is available to the Russians right now. They probably got sleeper programs in some of our computer systems.
Well, I mean, even with the Israelis hacking into pagers, I mean, if they're that sophisticated, good Lord. I mean, there's a lot of old technology that, I mean, I think that was a little bit more complicated, but I think, like you said, open source is kind of a big deal, because if it's open, then anybody can, have that connection in there. And that pipeline that was hacked in 21, I think, on the East Coast. So that was definitely some sabotage from definitely the Kremlin. There.
It's very easy. They drag, like in the Baltic, they dragged an anchor across, just cutting all the pipelines and cables and everything else. So,
but using the Chinese
Russian
alliance, with a nuclear submarine that was, escorting it.
Yeah, the other thing we're not doing, and it's still interesting to me that the Russians are still using their Black Fleet ships to move their oil.
Yeah, and
I'm surprised we're not putting any pressure on the countries that accept these ships to stop it, because the country of India is making a fortune. They're buying crude Russian oil and refining it and then selling it back to the West and making a hell of a profit, because they're buying it from the Russians at a cut rate, and they're shipping it on Russian transports, which don't have to have the insurance or anything else like that.
Maybe if we go through Yelp or Google Business and find an Indian lawyer that would like to take over these ships, and
there you go.
If anybody out there that's watching and knows somebody in there that's an attorney out there that can take over the cargo and use that towards collateral towards repaying back the war damage
to Ukraine.
And I know you mentioned that briefly.
Surprised nobody's jumped on that yet.
Yeah. So if you're an Indian lawyer that just got out of law school and trying to make a pretty penny, then I would definitely do that, or any other ports that are out there. Let's see here. Okay, I just want to pull up one comment that popped up. It's not necessarily due to this hearing, but wanted to kind of talk about this briefly. What is the best case outcome for the future of Kaliningrad? Well, I mean, the best case, in my personal opinion, is they do have a Baltic Republican Party, um, founded by Sergei Pasco, Rustam Vasiliev, and Rustam Vasiliev is still the leader of that party. Unfortunately, they've been isolated, and obviously they're, Russia is trying to kind of collapse that, but they say that that Kaliningrad belongs to Europe, and they want a separation of Kaliningrad with a European-leaning Republic of Königsberg, the city's former German name, as its capital. So there are people out there. That would be a wonderful interview to have with this gentleman, Rustam Vasiliev. So if anybody out there that's watching has any connection, go ahead and reach out to us. So always
I don't know for a fact, but the garrison in Kaliningrad and Königsberg has been severely reduced. Most of the troops have been sent off to fight in Ukraine. And as a matter of fact, just yesterday, made it clear that even the crew from the Kuznetsov, the aircraft carrier that the Russians have, has been sent off to fight in Ukraine. So I don't think they expect that aircraft carrier to come back online anytime soon. Right. So I'm speculating, but I think that in case of a all-out war, the Kaliningrad area would not last too long against the Polish onslaught and the Lithuanian onslaught that would take place, because they have to get rid of that carrier, and that would solve the Suwałki Gap problem very quickly, because if Kaliningrad, Königsberg wasn't capable of fighting, then that problem goes away.
Yeah, and then you also have the Finns and the Swedes, and I know the Swedes probably have a good Marine Army or Marine Corps, special forces. So, but we'll see. I mean that it's physically isolated from the rest of Russia, and not everybody there agrees with the politics. But unfortunately, those people are probably sent to the front.
Yeah, they used to, by the way, rotate people in and out with a rail line going through Lithuania. The garrison and their families used to move through that. And as a matter of fact, it would be interesting because in the railroad station in Lithuania, they had posters and pictures about Ukraine posted there for the Russians to see. Interesting little sideline there.
Oh yeah, that was I think that was good for them to see what is going on, because they got their communications kind of censored. So
yeah, it's interesting how brainwashed the people are when you watch the interviews with them, and now it's starting to change because of what happened in Kursk. But before, they were totally oblivious, and whatever Putin wanted to do, it's the excuse was always, well, it's above my understanding. The politicians must know something we don't know, and they must be doing right. That's what they're paid to do, that kind of stuff. So it's a different mentality in Russia.
And I always like to post this banner every live stream, but free Königsberg. Free Königsberg. Maybe Ukrainians can free them, but I always have hope. Here, there's always commissioning small light fighters to do some privateering. I don't know if I think that's kind of against international maritime law. But what's not against international law is hiring an attorney to blockade these cargo vessels that are coming into port.
Yep.
In relation to Russian shipping. Well, I guess so.
Yeah, Russian shipping should be banned from all of Europe. I'm just saying, because they are a criminal country. They're war criminals. They're waging an illegal war. And why would anybody accept any Russian ships coming in just beyond my comprehension. I think they need to be, if they do come in, they need to be seized legally through whatever the legal system is in that country. But the question is, you need that country to also cooperate in their legal system. So, but a few trial cases might work out fine. Let's try it in India. I don't know. The Chinese won't do anything, but I know the Indians might, because they are a democracy and they have rule of law, and they might just say, okay, these ships belong to Ukraine, and take them offline.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is it's in India's best interest to have a free market of energy. So if we have a better deal at the U.S. energy than Russian energy, they'll go with us. I think that's important to know most of the time. I mean, who knows all the deals that are being brokered. I want to play, because of important news with the Ukraine Action Summit and the UN General Assembly speeches by all the heads of states that are coming into New York City. I want to play this clip because Ukrainian President Zelensky was in Scranton, Pennsylvania yesterday. So I want to play this clip briefly.
Visiting the Electric City this weekend, Ukrainian President Zelensky thanking the hundreds of workers there who played a huge role in Ukraine's defense with their war with Russia.
And tonight, we're taking a look at some new video released from inside that tour of the ammunition facility. 2822 News reporter Julie Dunphy joins us now live in Scranton with more. Julie?
Nick, Candace, good evening. We're also hearing firsthand about the conversation between Zelensky and Governor Shapiro. Shapiro telling the Ukrainian president that he's very prideful to say that we have a very large Ukrainian heritage here in the Commonwealth. Zelensky thanking the workers directly yesterday afternoon at the Scranton ammunition plant, as well as drumming up more support.
So this is how we receive our steel.
Under tight security Sunday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited the Scranton Army ammunition plant.
400 people saved millions of Ukrainians.
Thanking the workers who are producing one of the most critically needed munitions for his country's fight to fend off Russian ground forces. President Zelensky also sat down with Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, along with other local leaders.
We are blessed to have so many Ukrainians living here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania is home to more than 150,000 Ukrainians and Americans of Ukrainian descent, the second largest number in the U.S.
And we feel a special kinship to them and to all of you in your work to defend Ukraine. We stand with you.
Thank you, Governor, for such words.
During the meeting, the parties discussed regional cooperation between Ukraine and the United States. Ivan Fedorov, head of the Zaporizhia Regional State Administration, a province in southeast Ukraine, and Governor Josh Shapiro signed an agreement to support the region's efforts to rebuild after the war. The main areas of cooperation include energy, agriculture, digital technologies, and defense.
The United States helped us from the very beginning of full-scale war, but we still count on continued support.
The Scranton plant is one of the few facilities in the country to manufacture 155 millimeter artillery shells and has increased production over the past year. Ukraine has already received more than 3 million of them from the U.S. Zelensky took a moment to express his gratitude to all of the employees at the Scranton plant.
Thank you so much. You helped us to survive against Putin invasion.
Now, the Ukrainian president has a busy week ahead in the U.S. He will speak ahead of the UN General Assembly tomorrow and Wednesday before he heads to Washington, D.C. to have talks with President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris to shore up more support for his country. Reporting live in Scranton, I'm Julie Dunphy, 2822.
Yeah, very interesting. And the other thing I think a lot of people don't realize is that the Pennsylvania National Guard and Lithuanian military have a training agreement. and the National Guard sends their people to Lithuania for training, and vice versa. So Fort Indian Town Gap, where I was stationed for a while, has got that relationship going, and that the Lithuanian community in Pennsylvania is also huge. I think it's maybe even larger than the Ukrainian community, because prior to World War I, prior to Lithuania getting its independence, a lot of Lithuanians would come there to get away from getting drafted into the Tsarist army, and they would go work in the steel mills in Pittsburgh, and then also in the coal mines and the mines in Pennsylvania. So the community is very large. My better half had jury duty once in Scranton, and she was surprised that they pronounced her last name correctly. They said, "We have no problem. We have such a large community." And then this was even before Lithuania regained its independence. The Lithuanian flag was flying high in Scranton, Pennsylvania, above a bank. So it's the community there is also very large.
Absolutely, and I think you have 800,000 Polish Americans. You have everybody that's kind of from that area, and I don't want to get into the political analysis, but I think President Trump won the first time because of that Russia reset button that Hillary had with Sergei Lavrov, and I think that just that image kind of just sat with people in a sour taste on there. But like I said, I don't want to get the politics.
It's a huge voting bloc. The Poles, the Lithuanians, the other Europeans in Pennsylvania, and they are really supportive of Ukraine. That's the thing that really stands out to me, and how supportive they are. So the party that both parties right now are falling a little short of showing their support for Ukraine. The Biden administration, by not releasing the weapons use, and the Republicans also, by some of them, not all of them, but some of them, by passing around disinformation points that come directly from Russia. It's sad to see that.
And that's our job, is to educate the U.S. government, U.S. Congress, and the public of why it's important to support them.
Absolutely.
Let me just see if there's any more comments. I don't see anything that's popping up as far as questions or anything like that. But final word, Colonel, from today's hearing that you saw, that was whether new or kind of confirmed.
Really, it just reiterated a lot of things I knew, but I think that the fact that the American public doesn't know them is the striking point, because the media isn't covering a lot of this stuff. Yeah, you'll see a little blurb somewhere, and that's it, and people can get on to what's going on with Madonna or Taylor, or whatever, Kardashian. This is an amazing thing. We have a very short attention span here in the United States, and probably elsewhere there. And the Europeans are a little more aware of all this stuff than we are. So, and again, it's our media where they're focused. So you need information passed on, and you need good information passed on, and you need to fight this disinformation that's coming from Russia. So,
yeah, I agree with you. I think we need to do more work, and we need to kind of speak this out to more people on the importance of what we just saw. Information war, sabotage, everything else. We're kind of behind on the curve. Yeah, behind on everything. Like the fact that we still don't know about the Nord Stream, but we're finding out stuff from 2011 today. I think it's we're that far behind. We need to kind of kind of open our minds to other locations. So, but maybe this is the breaking point that our intelligence and everybody on the local services can kind of go in that direction.
Yeah, we need to do this kind of broadcast more often, and pass on this information to people who really want to know what's going on there. So, and I think we're in a good position. You and I, BAFL, Blue Yellow USA, we've got a lot of information to share with people if they're interested in finding out what's really going on. and it's unfiltered information. We're not partisan in any way. We support anybody supports Ukraine, we support. Anybody supports the Baltics, we support. So it's the party brands don't mean anything to us, and basically we're here to help protect freedom and democracy around the world, and especially in Ukraine, the Baltics and Ukraine.
And that's why the Helsinki Commission, being a bipartisan commission, they put aside their partisanship. They like to have fun with each other. But what I noticed is that the participants in the commission, they have a total dedication to some of these issues that are with national security and with the Europe and things abroad. And I think I feel like the longer that you're in it, as far as a senator or congressman, the more that you find out, and then you're not as a freshman in it anymore. You know exactly what's going on in the world. You're not falling prey to misinformation out there.
Yeah.
So
NATO and Article 5 would get us involved in a shooting war, and the best way to stop that shooting war from occurring is to let Ukraine win right now.
And in NATO's 75-year history, Article 5 has only been enacted once. That was September 12th, 2001.
Yep. And by the way, Lithuania, Ukraine, Latvia, Estonia, they all provided military forces for that.
Yep. That's true. All right. Well, everybody, thank you for watching. The description will be coming in, but support our channel. Just like, subscribe, and share. Support Blue Yellow for Ukraine and their efforts to bring in important supplies to Eastern Ukraine. Support our campaigns as well to Congress and signing on the petitions, which the link will be below. So everybody, thank you, and we'll have some upcoming live streams coming up, and we'll let you know coming up. All right. Thank you.
Thank you all for having us. Take care. Bye.